Looks like we're about ready to get started. Let me just introduce myself and we can go around and talk about some of the planners here today. My name is Travis Hedwig and I'm Assistant Professor of Health Sciences at the University of Alaska Anchorage. I've got an emerging interest in homelessness, and sort of the goal of today's meeting is to just bring everybody together who's involved in this issue, whether you're a working professional, whether you're an academic, whether you're a community member that just has interest in this important issue for our state. We want to hear from you. So let's think of this as a brainstorming session, and we're going to have a couple of breakout sessions where we'll ask for your thoughts. If you want to remain anonymous, we have a suggestion box up front. So if you wanted to drop fill something out and drop it in there and remain anonymous, that's fine. The event today is going to be recorded. And the reason for that is that we want it to have life outside of today. So it will be archived through the library. We hope to be able to make it available through public media outlets. And we have a media release form over here if folks are comfortable with that and willing to sign it. If you're uncomfortable with being recorded, again, you can use the suggestion box or just be here listening and learning from each other. So just wanted to put that out there. Do we want to go around and introduce some of the other organizers here? Like maybe Erica and Rebecca?
Hi, my name is Erica Mitchell. I'm going to be taking notes over here, and I am a first-year graduate student in anthropology.
I'm Madeline. We're in the same grad program, same year. I'm going to be working on Facebook over here, and if anyone comments on that, I'll be letting you guys know their questions.
My name is Rebecca Barker. I'm an incoming Master Social Work student at UAA, and I'm your timekeeper today. So I'm going to wave this around if you've got 1 minute left to sort of wrap your thoughts up. We've got 3 hours, but it goes faster than you think.
Yeah, and Rebecca's going to help me stay on task here as well, hopefully. And then we have one other organizer, Sally Carahair, who is an anthropologist here at UAA, and she's out giving an interview right now, and we'll be back in a moment. So those are the organizers. If you have any questions at any point, let us know. Here, Sally. Yay. Okay, so just wanted to lay down a couple of ground rules. What we wanted to do today was create kind of a safe place for the exploration of ideas. I think a lot of people have very charged opinions about homelessness, and we welcome ideas, but we'd like to keep it focused on the positive, sort of solutions-based aspects. So I really want to invite everybody to participate, but let's do so civilly and respectfully. In a way that can hopefully push this dialogue. We want everybody to have a chance to speak. This is a very complex issue, and it's also a very critical health issue for our state. So we really encourage participation, but I really want to emphasize, let's keep this respectful to one another as we begin to move through some of this stuff. I mentioned the media release. We do plan on recording it. Sally's got that there. Maybe Sally can pass it around?
Yeah, I'm going to pass this around. So this is getting broadcast, as you can see, and shared with remote communities in other parts of Alaska. Thank you all for participating. They probably can't see me. Hi. So we are going to send around a media release. I also emailed media releases to the other communities. So if people would please sign those, then they can get facts back to us here in Anchorage. And with that, it is a safe space, and anyone in here, including yourselves, the key speakers, you're free to leave at any time if you want to. Or if you have a question, or if you want to see myself or Travis or anyone at any time, you just let us know. So.
And I just want to check in with the regional folks here. My understanding is that we've got Fairbanks, Nome, Bethel, and is Kodiak also on the line? Juneau, that's right, I forgot Juneau. Sorry, Holly. And is Kodiak also on the line? Okay, well, those are the regional representation here. What we were trying to do was invite this conversation to be truly statewide. We are a big state. Homelessness looks very different in different parts of our state, and we wanted to at least open up the conversation to folks that might be interested to hear that perspective. And I know Sue in Nome, for example, has some very specific ideas about what we can do to make homeless service access a little bit more equitable, that there are some barriers that we might want to talk about in terms of what this looks like outside of Anchorage and the urban areas. So hopefully we'll have time about that. I wanted to at this point take a little bit of time to introduce some of our key speakers. So in the interest of time, I wonder if you could just go around the room here, maybe take 2 minutes to introduce who you are, what it is that you do, and what you'd like to maybe hope to get out of this conversation today.
Christopher.
So would you like to start, Carmen, please?
Sure. My name is Carmen Springer. I'm the director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. The coalition works to ensure that all residents of Anchorage have access to safe, affordable, and sustainable housing, as well as work opportunities. And the coalition tries to be a network between social service organizations, businesses, local community residents, so that we can ensure that there are all the services that are appropriate. There aren't service gaps, there isn't over-provision in one area or not enough provision in another. And we try to increase access to everything that people need to become stably housed and remain stably housed. That can include anything from the obvious of permanent supportive housing to workforce development and training to networking with healthcare organizations to make sure that chronic and acute healthcare needs are taken care of. And we are a developing organization. I am currently the only staff person, and we're looking to develop. We'll be hiring our second staff person in July. And we hope to be a convener within the community on the issue of homelessness.
Thank you, Carmen.
I'm Sharon Shamar. I'm an associate professor at the Justice Center at UAA. And with my research interest in the past 10 years or so has been homeless encampments. And in addition to that, sort of conflict over public space. I've seen, when I moved to Anchorage 13 years ago, I moved into Fairview. And so this was a neighborhood that has a lot of conflict over public space in certain places. And that just sort of led me to focus on that. Fairview didn't seem like such a strange neighborhood because I realized looking back on my childhood that I lived in a neighborhood that was a lot like Fairview. I assumed it was just normal to have lots of different types of people on the street, but I guess some folks have issues with that. So one thing I've been looking at in my research is, and in my teaching, this semester I'm teaching a course called Homelessness and Crime. And again, a big focus is how do we deal with the fact that everyone is a citizen and everyone has access to public space, but yet there's a perception that some people have a more legitimate right to be in that space than others. How do we deal with that as a community?
Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, I'm Donna Gilda. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Social Work at UAA. In the past couple of years, I've been lucky enough to become involved in homeless issues here in Anchorage. I've been working with the Youth Point Time Count work group that has facilitated the standalone count that occurs concurrently with the larger city point in time count in January. I'm really interested in how to get students engaged in homeless issues. So I have a class this semester that has been partnering with Covenant House. They have an upcoming fundraiser, a community forum, and they're doing some advocacy and social marketing around homeless issues. And then I will have an upcoming study with a professor from the Justice Center at UAA looking at space and place and how our homeless youth kind of navigate their environment and how it affects their social service utilization and likelihood of being a victim of crime.
Thank you, Donna. If I could just chime in real quick, the regional folks, if you wouldn't mind, could you please mute your mics? If you have something specific to say, raise your hand, then unmute, and we'd like to invite you to the conversation, but we're getting a little bit of feedback in here. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, thanks. Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Mack. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Covenant House Alaska, and Covenant House provides direct care services to homeless and at-risk youth between the ages of 13 to 21 through a continuum of care, everything from emergency shelter, transitional living, outreach. We also include workforce development, housing, and ultimately our goal is to help these young people transition into independence.
Hi, my name is Sherry Hinshaw, and I work at the State of Alaska Division of Behavioral Health,
and I run a small unit focused on integrated housing and services for individuals with mental illness and addictions. The focus of the Division of Behavioral Health is primarily to establish a comprehensive system of behavioral health treatment services in Alaska. And so to that end, we focus more on the chronic homeless population. Those have been homeless for many years with severe disabilities. And so that is what I do as my day job. But I'm here today as a community member. So I just wanted to say that. But I probably will be talking about some of the work that I've been doing at the state.
I'm Kate Ariola. I live here in Anchorage. I'm a Master's Social Work graduate from UAA, and I just happened to see the flyer upstairs. I've been concerned since I arrived in Anchorage a couple of years ago about the homelessness population in general, but it's been more magnified to me about the elderly people that are homeless. Elderly. Currently I'm working in home care for seniors, and I see the struggle of the healthy elderly population in their homes fighting to stay in their own comfort zone. And then I look at what that problem looks like out on the street with the elderly. They don't have a voice, I don't think, right now. And so I would love to network, link up with somebody to start looking at the issues among the elderly. There's been several times in the last couple of weeks that I've called 911 to help rescue and some of the people that have been under great distress out in this cold weather, and some of those people have been elderly.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your perspective.
Hi, I'm Shannon O'Connell. I work at Carlick Manor, which is permanent housing for people who struggle with homelessness and alcoholism. There we provide services such as linking them up to mainstream resources, mental health and substance abuse treatment, medical treatment. We're helping them with working out legal issues and just learning the basics of independent living, maintaining their housing, and in some cases moving on to different housing. So basically helping people improve their quality of life.
I'm Colleen Ackerman. I'm currently the program manager at Carlick Manor. I work for the Rural Alaska Community Action Program Supportive Housing Division. Prior to coming over to Carlick in November of 2014, I was the program manager of Homeward Bound, which was a transitional housing program, also serving the chronic homeless folks who battled alcoholism and mental illness. And our supportive housing division has a total of 209 units right now of affordable housing. We just took on Safe Harbor, which has 100 units of transitional housing, but we are slowly making those permanent housing. As Shannon mentioned, Carlick Manor has 46 permanent housing units. Homeward Bound has 25, and then we have scattered site housing throughout the community, most of it in Mountain View, some of it in Fairview and Russian Jack area. We also have special needs housing in Mountain View, North Lane, Davis, Peterkin, and those have staff on site 40 hours a week to assist those folks with supportive services. Carlick Manor has services 24 hours a day, minimum of 2 staff on duty to support the folks in maintaining their housing.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Marnie Rivera. I'm an associate professor in the Justice Center at UAA, and I am recently contracted as the independent evaluator on 2 state-funded programs working with chronically homeless populations. Both of the programs are using the housing first model, meaning let's get these people into housing and then provide services and treatment. One of the programs is a sort of community treatment program, and this program is going to focus on a population with serious mental illness. The other program is using intensive case management, to focus on a population that's chronically homeless but has substance abuse issues as their primary disorder. So I'm really new to this area. I work in the area of substance abuse in terms of evaluation, but I don't have a strong background in homelessness. So I feel like I'm here to learn a lot more from you than I am to provide information. So thanks for having me today.
Hi, I'm Lisa Aquino, and I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Social Services here in Anchorage. We have 8 different programs, but 3 of those programs deal directly with homelessness. We run 2 emergency shelters in town, the Brother Francis Shelter and the Clare House. The Brother Francis Shelter is for adult men and women, and the Clare House is for women and women with children. And we also have homeless family services, which is case management for our clients at the 2 shelters, trying to get them into more permanent housing. On any given night, we have 250 adults at the Brother Francis Shelter, and we have another 100 in the emergency units at the Clare House. And at the Clare House, we also have some progressive housing units, trying to help our clients to move on to the next step as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm wondering, can we hear from the rural regions as well? Could you folks introduce yourself? Please unmute your mic and let us know who's out there in Cyberland.
Hi, this is Sue Steinacker. I'm in Nome. I'm the executive director of a very small, homegrown, Nome-grown nonprofit called the Nome Emergency Shelter Team, or NEST. NEST was started back in the spring of, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. NEST began as an entirely volunteer effort in the spring of 2009 after the second person in Nome froze to death due to cold weather exposure and alcohol consumption. And as a community of approximately 3,500, you take our numbers, multiply by 10 to get equivalent to Juneau. So 2 people freezing to death in Nome would be 20 in Juneau, or 200 in Anchorage. So I stay focused on per capita. But this effort began with a group of volunteers to provide shelter to people who were any adult in need, regardless of their level of inebriation. And we now, through grants and significant donations, are open nightly, 5.5 months a year, serve 2 meals a night, dinner and breakfast, and serve a surprising number of people. We had 162 people use our shelter last year. We filled almost 2,500 beds in a winter. And then we expanded into homeless prevention because there was no one else in Nome providing these services. And so, like behavioral health here, we have no residential treatment program. We have a tremendous problem with alcohol. I do think per capita, we're probably the alcoholic capital of Alaska. And even behavioral health can offer no sober housing. So using entirely with donations, we try to address the need for sober housing. We help with, if we can find a rental, to help people who are in recovery. We have a couple of folks that would meet scatter site housing first. Once again, prisoner reentry, we try to help with housing there. Getting people tickets home to their village if they're stuck in Nome with no other means to get home, but have housing in their village. We try to take on emergency home repairs, as well as help with rent and utility and mortgage arrearages. So there's just not, we're trying to fill a need. We didn't grow out in response to a grant or a program. We're just finding need and attempting to address it. And I'm joined here by our shelter manager, one of the initial volunteers, and one of our shelter monitors, who are all very concerned and committed to serving our chronic homeless, alcohol and stranded population here in Nome.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the regions want to introduce themselves, please? Okay, well, you might want to at some point. So I just wanted to take this opportunity now to kind of open it up, and maybe we can get into a little bit of a Q&A with some of our facilitators here. I'm wondering what, based on the work that you do and the populations that you serve, what are the target populations? I think a lot of times in terms of the media representation, how we think through who's at risk, who is the population and how it's defined, sort of the plural faces of homelessness and what that might look like based on the populations that you serve. So I wonder if some of you can speak to that in terms of your own work, the many faces of homelessness and how that sits with some of our community perceptions of what it looks like. So I guess anybody who wants to volunteer, or if you want to start and go around again, you want to?
Sure, and so the coalition itself does not provide direct service, but we work with organizations who provide service to any group or population that may experience homelessness or housing insecurity. So, and one of the things we do stress is the many faces of homelessness. A lot of times people do pick up just on the chronically homeless, especially with substance abuse issues. And so there's a lot, like we see there's usually 20% or less of the people experiencing homelessness in our community are the chronically homeless. And so what we do like to focus on with the coalition's work is making sure that all of the people experiencing homelessness in our community are represented. So if only 20% are chronically homeless, that means 80% are only experience homelessness either for a brief period of time, only once, and they regain stable housing and will keep it for the rest of their life, only with that one-time assistance. And so we just like remembering that, youth, either youth on their own or families with children, the Child in Transition program, which is within the Anchorage School District, has over 2,000 children a year that they identify that have that experience homelessness. So there are many youth in our community that do not have stable housing, and I want to let there be time for the agencies that actually serve them to speak. But if there are questions at the end, I can kind of loop back around and hit any populations that may have been missed.
Yeah, I think one of the questions here is we have sort of a community perception of what that looks like, and we're sort of trying to destabilize some of those stereotypes and thinking that it's actually a lot more common, that we're not looking at, there's no typology for it, that there's a whole range of faces of what that looks like. Some people that are on the more acute rung might be in and out. You might lose a job, might be a single mom who may be struggling right on the brink. That is also part of the conversation. And the other piece here is that it maybe isn't always about homelessness, that it's about expanding affordable housing stock. The idea that people ought to have expanded opportunities to be homeowners or to live in a place that they can call their own. And what does that look like for some of the populations that maybe you all serve in your everyday work?
Well, Carla Manor, we serve the folks who have been in the streets, in some case for decades. And in fact, we have 5 wonderful tenants with us today. Shannon and I brought from Carlick Manor. They all have just amazing stories, and hopefully in the small groups people get to meet them. But all of our folks have been in the streets, most cases for several years. Their age range, our youngest has been in her 20s, and the oldest is probably 69. And the average person in the streets that's chronic lives to be about 54 and 55. But most of our folks have also some type of a mental illness, chronic alcoholism, in some cases some medical disabilities. Some of them are veterans from different wars, and some of them are not from the wars. We have folks that have been in other scattered site housing. Some of them have been homeless since they were adults. We've had some that have been in multiple treatment episodes, but basically we have a very, very strict criteria for Carlick Manor. Homeward Bound, the transitional housing program, they also have to be chronically homeless. They all have to have a problem with chronic alcoholism, and many of them also have various disabilities, medical and psychiatric disabilities. Again, that's transitional. We have our street outreach program I didn't talk a lot about, but that's connected to Homeward Bound, and our housing service services specialists actually do outreach to go ahead and get our Harlech Manor folks when there is an opening. But our street outreach folks go out there to all of the locations where the homeless folks frequent, get to know them, build rapport, and try to engage them in our services. But some of the other rural cap housings are for low-income folks. They're not free, they are affordable. And I think our lowest housing is probably $700 a month. Harlech Manor efficiencies are $774, and then we have one-bedroom apartments.
Sorry if I can just thank you for that. I just want to refer people really quickly. When you came in, there was a fact sheet on your chairs, and we were already hearing some echoes of some of the facts and numbers that are listed on there. I wanted to point out too that, so from our kind of statewide numbers, what we know, chronic homelessness is only about 20% of the population. But then if you're going to speak to somebody who works specifically with that population, you might have higher numbers of things like mental illness or substance abuse problems, other kinds of abuses that have happened. So keeping in mind that when we're talking about all of these different groups, the percentages and the numbers are going to be different depending on whether we're talking chronic or acute, whether we're talking youth, homeless first time, maybe one time only in their life, versus elderly, somebody who's been living this way for decades. So really a lot of different experiences, and there's some good information on that fact sheet as we're hearing it reinforced through our speakers here.
This might be a good time too to talk about the Clare House and our clients there. So the Clare House is an emergency shelter, as I said, for women and children. That's a group of homeless people, and it's a very homeless children. It's rapidly increasing population. And that population is often missed by things like the point-in-time count. Homeless women and children typically it just looks a little different. They might not be living on the street. They're very likely couch surfing or staying in other people's apartments, in their car, if that's a possibility. Different kinds of situations. And just to say that is a population that looks different. Often, maybe not as often chronic homeless that we have as clients in the Clare House, but that doesn't mean that they aren't that it isn't common to see them dipping up, down below, like it's a pattern, because it's really hard to stay in housing and to find reliable employment so they can stay in housing. But that's another group of homeless people here.
So for Covenant House, we serve youth between the ages of 13 and 21, and we do go up to 24 in some of our programs. For the youth that are under the age of 18, the questions we often get is, can they go back home? And what we want people to know is that the youth we work with, going back home is not a viable option. These are youth who are coming from situations of violence, histories, maybe family members that they're staying with have a history of mental health or substance abuse issues. Many of those youth tend to be engaged in the foster care system, or when they're coming to us, we're actually filing a report because there's a history of abuse going on. 70% of the population, though, is now 18 and older, and we are seeing more youth who are couch surfing. They are having histories of homelessness, meaning that we are seeing more youth in camps. About anywhere from 40 to 50% of our youth are coming to us with some type of mental health concern or diagnosis. Substance abuse, we're seeing an increase in that area. These are young people who have very little family support, if any. Youth who've aged out of the foster care system and have become homeless. Young people who have very little work experience, so being able to get a job. And then right now they're also competing with older adults to find housing, so there's just very limited housing options for them in our community. Our ultimate goal is to connect these youth to those resources, whether that be workforce development, but also life skill building. So for us, transitional housing is very important. I think one of the other major concerns that we're having is the human trafficking issue. Our youth are very vulnerable, and they are preyed upon for prostitution, and that's for both male and female, not just young women. Of course, we do see more young women engaged, and for us, it's just becoming, we're really concerned about the human trafficking issue that's going on in our community. And we are very fortunate to work really closely with the English Police Department, FBI, who have been very strong advocates in this area.
So I used to be a part of a street outreach program with RoCap before I started at Carlick Manor, and in that program we went to the homeless camps, Beans Cafe, transit centers. We hiked in the woods looking for people and went wherever they were. And I can't give you numbers or percentages, but just as everyone's been saying, there is no one place for someone who's homeless. They're all different. Seen people, in cars to camps, to sleeping in an alleyway, to couch surfing, and all different ages, all different ethnicities, all families, children, people who are elderly or disabled. It really varies. And I think a big deal is just meeting them where they're at. Outreach is so important because you're able to refer them to the specific service that they need for that individual person. So I think that's really important for the community.
This is Sue in Nome. I have a request. The paper tearing and the writing is getting really picked up by the mic at this end. And I don't know whether, can't really see your whole layout. I don't know if there's a way to move the writing and paper area away from the mic.
Okay, thank you for that, Sue. I'll move the mic right now.
Okay, and I also wanted to comment that in our area, we're dealing with, I don't want to say exclusively, but almost exclusively a Native Alaskan population. And much, for our true homeless, chronic year-round homeless, it is all alcohol driven. So in some way, we're a little different in that we are a narrower subset of who we're serving. And again, even with the homeless prevention, because we are largely a Native community, that's, we have I always try to tell people we're not a homeless shelter because people's perceptions of a homeless shelter are families and kids and this whole, someone who lost their house because they lost their job. Whereas, for us, it's really usually the ravages of alcohol. And unfortunately, it is not exclusively, but largely the Native Alaska community.
Thank you for that, Sue. I think what we're getting here is a sampling of a wide variety of what this might look like in different communities. So I think it's important to keep that focus on. And then in the context of maybe Northwest Alaska, that really plays into some of the cultural constructions of what it means to have a home, what it means to have a place where one belongs. And all of this, I think, speaks to some of the conversations we're having in our communities. And maybe that could lead to another question about what is unique about homelessness in Alaska. We are such a big state. Several of you have talked about, like in the context of human trafficking, the idea of movement from rural locations to urban locations and back. What aspects of homelessness are really unique and challenging to Alaska? And have you guys seen that in your work?
I appreciate Sue sharing, things that are specific to Nome, because I think it's important to know the differences in our community and how things are affecting our communities individually. In Anchorage last year, we had cost of rent exceeds income cited as the #1 reason for losing homelessness, losing stable housing. And what we see is that Anchorage having a very low vacancy rate. What that means is we just don't have literally enough places for people to live. We're much lower than the national average, and we're not gaining enough units of housing to meet the needs that our community has. And what that places is unrealistic choices for people to make. They're really not choices at all. When people cite that their rent exceeds their income, that means that they're faced with a choice of, do they pay rent or do they buy food? Do they pay for their electricity when it's heating their home, or do they pay their rent? When they're making these choices, which aren't really choices, that's when they're faced with homelessness. And so when you're in that when you're in that space, you can't make one choice that's going to provide what you need to care for you and your family, and that's the situation that we're finding are the people that are most frequently experiencing homelessness in Anchorage.
Anything else on what may be unique to this issue in our state?
I think one of the things that we see, particularly at our shelters, is how the weather impacts the youth coming into shelter and leaving the shelter. Particularly on colder days, we'll have a higher number of youth intaking. But like I said earlier, more youth are kind of coming together and camping. And it's warmer outside, and they have the resource. We're seeing that they are choosing to camp and really trying to work to encourage them to come back into the shelter. And it can be sometimes challenging.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was gonna say that too. I mean, weather, obviously. We have the city has a cold weather plan, so if it goes below 45 degrees, the Brother Francis shelter will provide staffing for overflow, and we use Beans Cafe at night.
That doesn't happen anymore. They don't do that anymore.
They do. They should be doing that if it's below 45 degrees. And they have been, but I'm sorry if your experience, if you haven't been able to have that service, but and that's something, but that's always a challenge and something that we have to kind of make a case for every year to make sure that we have funding to be able to have those kinds of overflow capacities for cold weather.
So what does that look like?
Circles.
Yeah.
It's talking circles, that's all. Yeah, that's it.
Well, you can have it.
Yeah, can you speak to that?
Yeah.
We'd like to know what are the problems that you guys are seeing? What are the problems that you guys are experiencing?
Look, just go down to the Beans Cafe and just hang out there for a half hour and watch. And look at it. Yeah, I know that you guys always been there. But you guys go down there, hang out for a half hour, 15 minutes. And if you guys get a chance, go to the Francis shelter, go get something to eat, see what they got, and see what they do, and see how they treat people. They treat the homeless people like animals. You know it. And that's the way it keeps going. I'm lucky enough I got out of there. And I was happy. The people that came upon me, they looked for me. I didn't look for them. They came to look for me. But just like like she says, we're gonna have a chance to talk later on. But just talking around in circles. What else do we do? We come over here and we sit here and we voice our opinion. Just be in one ear and out the other, and we'll be back to the same old deal. And that's not really right.
So what ought to happen? What would be a good way to focus, or what has it meant to have a house, for example, to have a place of your own?
What it meant to me to have a house, my own apartment, my own place, it was glorious. But it was my own mess up. I invited the wrong peoples over, and I got evicted. So that was my fault, not theirs. But just look over, see everything. I don't know, maybe there ought to be more Carlock Manors around, or more Clear Houses around, or more Homeward Bound, or something to have these guys feel like they're part of the city. Because right now, they look down at us, at Carlock Manor, they look at us like we're trash. I don't believe I'm trash. I lost too many people in Carlock Manor out on the streets. I don't want to go that way. I don't think anybody wants to go that way. But maybe there ought to be more to help other people that didn't ask. I didn't ask for help. I got it though. There's other people out there that were like me or are like me that's not asking for help and dying out there.
You need knowledge of the resources that are out there.
A lot of the resources that we do have, I have, that's available to me, I don't use it.
Yeah, but homeless people don't know about that, you know, you gotta teach them.
Gotta educate them.
Where would you go to get that kind of stuff? Like if you were interested in learning about.
When you guys came over to Carlock Manor, you students, you know, you guys made a big impact on my life. You guys made me feel like I was somebody. And then more outreaches like that probably would help. That's, I don't know, what else, you know, it is.
I remember back in the 80s, summertime, everybody was split from 4 Days No Sewer Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Program. And in the winter, they don't flood in. And you hardly don't see that anymore because now they're kind of leery of taking people off the street because they know, yes, they do have an alcohol problem, but they're only using that place for a place to live and eat and sleep and clean up. But now they just accept pretty much mostly convicted felons because they don't want to go back to jail. So if you look at it, like you hardly ever see any homeless men there. It's mostly felons, or you know, people would go to detox. Well, it's getting cold now, so I better get a program. And they're not being straight with themselves. Neither was I. I just played the game and I said what they wanted to hear. And then when it would get warm, see ya. I'll see you next winter. You know, but in the 80s, there was men and women sleeping in the corners. It was bad. But you really don't see it that much, as much as it was in the 80s, the 70s, when this was a really filthy city. Mm-hmm. You couldn't even walk down the street without knocking over fists and half gallons and stuff. And yeah, it's getting better because back in the 80s, all they had was the Anchorage Rescue Mission downtown. They didn't have Beans Cafe. They didn't have
Brother Francis shelter?
No, that was before I hit the street. I first moved in the first Brother Francis shelter. There's a room about maybe bigger than this. And you got everybody and their mama in there, fighting over here, having sex over here, drinking over here, smoking pot over here, arguing over here. And Brother Dave and Brother Bob said, this is not a good idea here. But yeah, it changed a lot. It has changed a lot. You know, it took a long years, but you don't really actually see that many homeless people as much as you did in the 80s and 70s. So it is getting better. It's just taking this whole little.
Excuse me all, this is Kodiak, and sorry we had to join late, but we are on right now, so if you could just let us know, is the panel presenting at this point, or is our participants asking questions? Thanks.
Hi, Kodiak, and welcome. We're in a little bit of a Q&A right now, and just trying to get everybody to begin to think about what are the central issues that we need to be thinking about as a state. So we went through and did some introductions, and now we're just kind of getting into some more specific questions with audience participation. So welcome.
Thank you.
And actually, I think that this is a good segue. Actually, you guys have brought up a lot of details that we hadn't heard yet from other people, and that's fantastic. And I think it reinforces several of the reasons why people are here today. I was wondering, I would open this up to the key speakers or our tenants from Carlick. What do you guys see in your various positions and your experiences that are the biggest barriers to actually connecting people to services? Who can start right there?
One of the biggest barriers I see is people. I was homeless since I was 15. I'm over 50 now.
No way.
No. But one of the biggest barriers I see, the people I know, is that people don't want to answer to anyone. They don't want, look, if I gotta pay $50 a month, that's 5 jugs that I could spend on getting drunk. I don't know how to say this, but when I was 9 years old, I decided I was going to be an alcoholic when I grew up. I watched Beretta, and I seen that alcoholic there, I said, I'm going to be like him. And that's what I did. You know, I didn't want to answer to anybody. I didn't want to give anybody any of my money that I figured I could use to get drunk. And that meant, okay, I get corporation checks 4 times a year. That's, to me, when I was homeless, that meant a roof over my head 1 month, every 4 months. Every 4 months, I had a roof over my head. But still, I had answered to somebody. There wasn't a landlord, but there was somebody saying, who can come into my room, who can't? Who can visit me and who can't? When I was out on the streets, when I was in a tent, no one told me that. No one told me who can visit me. No one told me who I could drink with. And I have no idea, maybe I just got old, but I figured, living out there, I was going to die out there. And I didn't want to, in 1 year, I went to 34 funerals of my friends. I knew 60 people who had died in 1 year. 60 people who had died on the streets. 34 of them were my friends. I went to their funeral. And I look around and when I went to their funeral, I look around and I didn't see my street friends there. I seen their family. I go back out on the street as soon as I run. Why weren't you there? Oh, I want to get drunk. You got to get past how are you going to tell someone that a roof over their head is going to be better than getting drunk? How do you tell a person that who wants to get drunk all the time? That's one of, I still have many friends living on the streets. Many. And I still see them dying out there. I lived on the streets for 30-some years. And I don't want to see any more of my, I just had one good friend. He passed away in dignity. He had a place he could call home.
That's where he wanted to be. Yep. He wanted to be at home with us, with his family. We lost him. He didn't die of alcoholism, died of cancer, but he wanted to be at Carlton Manor with us and die in dignity. And he got his wish. thank God for his family that actually let the Carlick Manor staff let him come home and be with us. It's hard, but just like Dave was saying, you know, this problem is not going to go away just because you guys put numbers on. We're not numbers. Once you guys put numbers on us, you might, just like Dave said, might as well bury us now. Get it over with. We're not no statistics. We're not no numbers. We're human. It just I talk for myself. I'm human, and I have an alcohol problem. So that's I can just speak for myself. That's it. But I'm not a number. I'm gonna be 55 next year. Next week. Next week. And I got to do the goal. Next year, or else I'd never have the sense of humor. But you know, when my brother he passed away, he got CSP beat the shit out of him. Excuse my language. Beat him up, broke his neck, and cops came over, and they looked at him, and he's not one of our regulars, because he just came from the village, and in the village, we don't have no washer and dryer. We have a creek or river to go wash our clothes and stuff, you know. And he came in, he was dirty, and they looked at him, he's not one of our regulars. They put him as a number. They give him a number. He lasted 3 weeks with his neck broken. And I had to unplug him. You guys want to put numbers on us. You guys got all numbers, statistics.
So then it sounds to me like some of what I'm hearing here is that one barrier is that perhaps society in general in Alaska thinking too much about numbers and reports, and one way to help would be to get the public more engaged with, as we were saying earlier, the faces of homelessness and who it actually is, and getting more of that connection out in the public's mind. Would you agree with that?
It's more than likely I would have to. There was no way I could dispute it. She's got a question.
One thing that I never thought I was going to say this, because being a homeless and alcoholic and stuff like that, I'm downright irresponsible with my finances.
Here.
And I am truly thankful. I never thought I was going to say that for Office of Public Advocacy. Because right now I get a check just like some people do every 4 months, and I never get to see the check. Whereas before, when I was getting my native corporation check, that check would be gone in about 3-4 days. Whereas now I can just call my case manager up and she'll cut me whatever I need. It's where, you know, if you're an alcoholic or drug addict, you're totally irresponsible with your money. And nobody wants to say that, especially as an adult. I'm thankful because I don't even have to look at the person and pay my rent. It's already paid. Whereas they give me the check, I walk by a liquor store and, well, I'll pay them tomorrow. So I'm just thankful for Office of Public Advocacy. I never thought I was going to ever say something like that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, because I'm the same way too. I see my payee, and I asked her, can I get a hug or am I invading your space? Or, hey, my birthday's coming up, can I get some more? No, you gotta come up with a plan. Okay. So, me and my case manager were talking, so let it be at that. But yes, Richard, I agree very much. Totally useless with money. Money and me is like oil and water.
I'd like to revisit my concern and address my question to this lady that works for Carmen. You said that your oldest is 69.
Several actually.
So give us some information about the length of time these elderly people stay in your shelter and what happens to them.
Well, it's not a shelter, it's permanent housing.
Okay.
They can stay there as long as they want, like anybody else in their own apartment.
And we have, I think the last report that I did, we served a total of 84 since we opened our doors in December 11th of 2011. And of the 46 we had in the program as of December 31st, 57% of them had been in the project over 2 years, which means, you know, the grant again has been in place over 3 years. And those that are in their 60s do have some health challenges, of course, because they have been in the streets for many years. And Shannon and Miyaki, our housing services specialists, often take our not just our elderly folks, but even our younger folks to their appointments, and they coordinate the medical appointments and psychiatric appointments. But they can stay there, hopefully as long as the funding is alive. I mean, we were looking at losing our funding recently.
What's it like, what's the challenge getting them qualified for Medicaid, Medicare?
Well, that is a challenge. We have been successful with getting several of our folks on disability and Medicaid and Medicare, but you know, some of them have been denied. A lot of our folks, over 90% of Carlick Manor, are Alaska Natives, so they have access to Indian health services. Our non-natives receive a lot of their services at Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center. And we work with payees and guardians, conservators, and other case managers from like Anchorage Community Mental Health, South Central Foundation, Kiana Clubhouse, on linking them up with their benefits.
So we can use, this community can use more advocacy for elderly housing for the homeless. That's the way I see it. And unless we go out there and find out where they're at, who they are, and put legs on it, because that's the only way you're going to get funding, is you have to be able to have some concrete information about how many and what that community need gap is.
Right.
So I would love to link up with somebody to start looking at it.
I think a good organization in relation to senior housing is Brooklyn Housing Authority.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if I could just say one thing, going back to your question earlier, what sets Alaska apart, I think the municipality of Anchorage and the North Slope Borough are the only two entities in the state that have communities that have taken health powers. And so the rest of the state doesn't have any sort of way to funnel money through to services or taxation. I mean, when you look at other states, they have this little tax for that and this little tax for that, and they put that money directly into services. And so while some, you know, tax money does flow back into services in Alaska to some extent, it's not the same as what you might see in other states. And so, you know, right now, the state of Alaska is looking at Medicaid expansion, and the impact of Medicaid expansion on the homeless population cannot be understated or overstated, because the homeless population is the entire, makes up a huge portion of that gap in services that don't make enough to qualify for the insurance exchange subsidy. So that opens up huge doors to populations like those served by Carlick Manor that haven't had access to Medicaid before due to substance addictions. And so having access to health care would be huge for individuals who need to go back to work, want to go back to work. I mean, a huge reason for homelessness is job loss and lack of affordable housing. So having health care in order to be able to get back to work, in order to be able to pay for an apartment, is got a huge benefit. So there needs to be, hopefully people are making the connection between homelessness and Medicaid expansion right now, because that's huge. And I guess the other thing that I wanted to just talk about a little bit is supportive housing. Okay, sorry, time limit. So supportive housing, permanent supportive housing, is really a simple concept. It's permanent, meaning that you live there for as long as you want. None of us move into an apartment thinking we'll live there for the rest of our lives, but we also don't have a time limit on a day that you have to move out. And it's housing that's affordable and safe, so you don't pay more than 30% of your income, which is the standard that all of us follow. And then the services that go along with that to keep the individual housed and stable. And so supportive housing is a solution to homelessness. It's a cost-effective solution to homelessness. And I think it gets very complicated because people, who's taking responsibility then for paying that? But, you know, the state and local communities are paying for the cost of homelessness right now. And so there's a lot of conversations going on about, you know, is housing a human right? And really, the conversation really is supportive housing is cheaper than chronic homelessness. And so it really isn't a moral argument, although I think housing is a human right. But it's not a moral argument because it is cost effective. So those are just, I kind of wanted to just bring up a couple points that I was hearing people talk about.
Yeah, just to extend that too, I mean, I think we can make the case that it's actually a responsible use or a responsible stewardship of public monies when we're going to see the increase in expenditures in all kinds of domains down the road. Similar to the treatment argument, for every dollar you front load into prevention, you see savings in treatment down the road. Same kind of thing. And I also wanted to just look back and acknowledge the folks in the back. I mean, you're sharing your stories, first of all, extremely brave, but the one takeaway for me is the importance of humanizing this issue. I think oftentimes we do tend to say, you know, show me the numbers, and you guys are challenging us on that, and I thank you for that. The other thing in terms of public, perhaps, misperceptions is the idea that the individuals that live at Carlick are actually rent-paying tenants. They're on a lease, like anybody else who enjoys an apartment. And I think that's commonly misunderstood. And I've seen it represented in the media that way, the notion of free housing, which... Right.
We're freeloaders.
Right, and I think we have an opportunity here to correct that stereotype. It's not true. It's rent-paying tenants on a lease.
And actually, several of our current tenants are paying full price because they don't have a voucher. And that's $774. So they're not free. Everybody at Carlick Manor is paying based on their income. And we have a certain amount right now that don't have vouchers, although there's a possibility we'll be getting more vouchers for Carlick, which is what my hope is.
So I'm thinking
this is Sue and Nome.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was going to ask if in the connected communities had one more couple minutes to speak or ask a question, and then we should move it forward to the next activity. So go right ahead.
Well, are we still in discussing potential barriers and uniqueness?
Absolutely.
Okay. I wanted to say that I think it's important to recognize that the cost of living and the cost of rentals is very diverse across the state. That the National Low Income Housing Coalition did a really comprehensive study at over 3,100 communities, boroughs, and counties across the country, and about 35 here in Alaska. And, you know, like for Nome in 2012, they're saying that to be able to afford a 3-bedroom apartment, you would need to be earning at the 30%, you know, of your contribution towards housing. You would need to be earning $36 an hour, and that was 2012. We have a number of people here, you know, trying to raise a family, making $12 to $16 an hour. The other problem we have is absolutely. I mean, I appreciate what Anchorage said, but believe me, Nome has no availability of housing. Part of that is due to the fact of the tremendous high cost of construction in rural Alaska. That it's been 2 years since I asked a realtor, but at that time it was estimated at $325 a square foot for turnkey construction. What is happening, and I've had this repeatedly confirmed, is that what it costs to build, it will not appraise for as much as it costs to build. Therefore, nobody is investing in new construction, and the banks won't loan money because it's a losing operation. And we have so many inappropriately housed people in Nome, and it's probably even worse in the villages where you have 12 people living in a 2-bedroom house. But so you know, it's. Go ahead. Oh, wait, I do want to add that the other challenge in rural Alaska, we are completely ineligible for all of those voucher programs that AHFC offers. that they don't feel that, that there isn't a large enough caseload in any small community to justify having an office to manage those vouchers. Therefore, we get none. No VASH vouchers, none of them. And so, and then there's also the perception of all the native corporations are taking care of things, or the regional housing authorities are taking care of things. And I can assure you there are many people falling through the cracks, and I won't bore you with all the specifics, but it's not like we're all one tribe here in Nome. We are many different tribes, and yet only some are supported here in Nome, and some don't have any rental assistance whatsoever. So I don't mean to be whining, but I'm just wanting to say that, even with, while the state may be different than the lower 48, there's a lot of differences within the state as well.
So in keeping on this idea, one of the things we had in mind was to have some kind of a breakout session where we'd explore basically these ideas that we've just started. So basically, if we can continue this conversation on identifying some barriers, I think Sue's just highlighted a really big one, which is some of the inequalities in terms of accessing funding to rural hub communities. So thank you for that. Do we want to do a...
Before you do that, can I make a comment on Carlick Manor? And Congressman Young made a kind of a strange statement about wolves. But actually, there are wolves out there preying on the homeless. And I objected to Carlick Manor. Housing First is doomed to be a failure. But let me tell you the wolf issue. I sued the Brother Francis Shelter. I sued Beans Cafe and actually won. And it was because of one of the wolves. The first wolf that exists, it makes it very dangerous here in Anchorage, is the drug wolf. The homeless people that are here, I can handle the inebriates. But what I can't handle are the vulnerable people at Beans Cafe and the Brother Francis Shelter, homeless people who are being sold drugs. It's changed the chemistry of dealing with the homeless inebriate. They're more violent. I witnessed 2 days ago the worst beating I've ever seen. I mean, being Italian, I've watched a lot of beatings, but nothing like the kicking that this homeless person took in the head, in the stomach, and continued to get kicked and actually assaulted. I don't know how he lived. That's the number one wolf. The number two wolf are the social service agencies, and he hit it on the head. The statistics that, hey, we got to go out, we got to have outreach, we got to do it in a low-income neighborhood where the alleged problem is. Carlick Manor, I wasn't against so much the concept as much as the location, because recently a man was killed, but it was the 4 children and the mother in the car that could have been killed, because if this man turns out to be a public inebriate, why would you put Carlick Manor between the 2 most heavily trafficked streets in the city? And by association, by location, these guys' friends are right over the hill. The temptation to go back to their lifestyle, in fact, either direction, continues that destructive lifestyle. But worse are the social service agencies who didn't listen to the neighborhood and say we have too many. He mentioned Brother Bob, Brother Dave, Jim Calderola. I was there 32 years ago when Francis Strader died. Brother Bob and Brother Dave had a mission. They put him in a heavy industrial area, said they'd never do that again. That social service agency let it deteriorate and increase the population so heavy that after I sued them as public health, safety, economic interference, and quiet enjoyment for having a homeless shelter next to a heavy industrial area that's allowed noise, smoke, dust, all the negatives, Their resolution was to put up a bigger fence to protect my business from homeless people. That's how far they deteriorated in their behavior. So when you ask them, why am I being called an animal? He invited you down for 15 minutes. I say, come on down, but be careful, because I had a gun pulling on me. The hygiene, the sanitation, the CAP team that interviews and seeks out the tenors who are living in tents, they throw away their boots after they go ahead and go through the camps because of MRSA, fecal material, etc. You will never win on helping the homeless when you do that to a neighborhood, because you take good people who want to help, willing to help, do help, and once they do, you keep pouring it on until you suffocate them. And you walk on moral grounds, and anyone who opposes anything you do to that holy word of homelessness is nothing but a low-down, dirty skunk. And the real skunks here are the social service agencies who are allegedly having some endorphins going off in their head because they have a professional mission of helping the homeless, when nothing more, they're relieving their guilt. Now, unfortunately, I have to go back to work because I'm flooding, and I have to go shovel up some fecal material because of the melt, and it's ugly. But if ever you want to come down and visit a big mistake, I'll show it to you. Have a good day.
Hey, remember, Brother Francis, all those people down there, they still work for you.
They still work for me. 134 W-2s.
You got that right.
And no one can tell me that my worker, he didn't just get shot with his girlfriend in the tent. It was a little more extreme than that. And I believe it was drug related. Good luck. You don't see many of me here, but that Carlick Manor is a loser, and it'll be closed within a year when they lose their funding. That was a mistake. They're going to lose it. You have a good day. And remember, don't see your time.
See you later. So what we're essentially talking about here is building accommodating and inclusive communities. So I suppose everybody has a voice, and we're going to move on now. So.
Yes, we are going to move on really quick. We are going to make a slight change to the agenda today just to keep everything on time, because we do need to be out of the room by 5 p.m. So I think we all deserve a little bit of a break and some snacks and some coffee and some water. So I'm going to ask that we actually do our break now for about 10 minutes. I'm going to hang these signs up as reminders of what's been brought up in the conversation, and I am just going to remind you one more time, curiosity is welcome. Everybody's opinions and experiences are valued, but we do want to make sure that we don't just blame what problems are going on, but that we're actually looking forward for, okay, this is our situation, what can we do that's positive to move it forward. So,
is that the break is going to be the small group today?
Yeah.
So let's take about 10 minutes. Yeah. Thanks. So with the breakout activity was the barrier exercise, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So we can just continue on with that. Jump right to that. we have enough pads? All right, do we have enough pad stations? We got 1, 2, 3. Is that it? What do we want to rip off a couple of individual shoes as well? Right. Okay, yeah. Just anything that I'm forgetting. He's already vocally against the initiatives. As soon as he walked in, that we would get, kind of a real. But he's now checked out. Everybody has an opinion and a voice, and that's part of what we're dealing with, right? Civic community perception, that's definitely one of them. So, we got to rearrange it, refocus, find out solutions. So. If you continue to show up at these kind of events, you'll see him again. He's always there. So if we want to try to retake our seats again and reel this in for the next activities. Thanks. If everyone wants to find their seats again, let's dive back in. thanks again for everybody for coming back and staying. This is wonderful. We didn't lose you.
So welcome back, everyone. Again, thank you. We've changed it up a little bit because I am trying to keep a fun time, like I said. So we're going to have a brainstorming activity. It's going to have two parts to it. So the first part is we would like to encourage you guys to break up into about 5 groups. For our participating communities, each individual library can be its own group. And for this portion, we are going to try and connect the barriers and the facts that have been identified by many different people today. And we're going to try and connect those to possible solutions. So some things that I'd like for you to do is when you break up into your group of about 5 people or so, I would encourage you to actually get into a group with people who you don't know. So if we could get speakers mingling with folks over here and get so that we have groups that have a lot of different experiences and knowledge in them. And then in your group, go ahead and quickly introduce yourself to everybody. And then we have these pads. I'll pull this table out. A couple people can work around here. We can stick them on the walls and write on the paper. But we would like you to kind of recap in your group what were the barriers that you heard today about trying to either solve homelessness, prevent homelessness, or even barriers to connecting people to services so that they can use them successfully. So any of those kinds of barriers. And then with that, think about things that we could do as a state or as a neighborhood, as a remote village or a town or a large city. What are things that we could do? One of the things I'd like us to think about are what are things that maybe the state could do? What are things that maybe agencies that already exist could do or could get help with doing? And this is a big one for me personally. What are things that we could do to help get this issue out in the public more? And not with stigmas and stereotypes and a whole bunch of faceless numbers attached to it, but to get people in the public to understand the reality of what's going on with homelessness in Alaska and how they can maybe be a part of the solution. So connecting barriers to solutions. We're going to do that in groups of about 5 people. You can write on these papers. I have markers and pens. And then we'll discuss, and when you guys are done, we'll take about 15 minutes for that. And when you guys are in the communities on OWL are done as well, we'll take just a couple of minutes in each group to discuss what you guys came up with. And then I have one final activity after that, which will be pretty quick. You guys will give us some individual feedback. Okay?
And you might even think of this in a sort of a scalar fashion too. So there might be policy-related things. There might be specific things that you're seeing in your community. You might want to link that to other statewide initiatives. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the legislature right now about funding and challenges and opportunities around Medicaid expansion. Some of the ideas we've already identified in the first half of this, just sort of continue on with that. Let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper and connect these in a sort of statewide dialogue here. So.
You guys can get up and start group it up.
There's a sheet back here too if someone wants to take a group back here. All right, thank you guys for that. Now we'd like to have an opportunity to check back in with folks. So is anybody wanting to volunteer to go first and share a little bit about what their group did?
And then we'll open it up for our participating communities in the rest of Alaska to share what you just brainstormed.
You guys want to go first? All right, so we have a volunteer, somebody who wants to share what their group came up with. And then what I'd like to do is maybe give everybody 3 minutes so we can go around and everybody can have a shot at this, including the regions.
Yeah, and please make sure that especially if you're in the back that you speak up enough that our participating libraries in the rest of Alaska can hear you. Okay?
Well, believe it or not, we didn't follow your rules. So what I might do is just say my interpretation, and I'll turn it over to John to actually share his take on things. But one of the problems that we talked about was, and I'm going to put this in my own words, but there's a continuum of homelessness. So at the one end, you have the people who are chronically at the sleep-off center, chronically being picked up by police, and then you have this whole gamut. Sean shared with us is that some people don't have serious problems with police, don't have serious sleep-off centers, so they don't qualify for a number of different services. He's not native, so he doesn't qualify for a number of different things. So, how do you...
Never been incarcerated.
So, I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit more about your situation to describe where you're at in this sort of continuum.
Sometimes I'm the ugly white man that stays in the basement, to put it bluntly. And every time I go to find, and God bless Connie up at the neighborhood health clinic that deals with the homeless program, which has given me a hand up instead of a hand out, and I have my medicine and that, but I try and get to other programs, and I don't fit the bill. I tried to get into Homeward Bound, and I couch surf, and I ain't been in sleep off that much. Never been incarcerated. So many days at Brother Francis, so many days at the rescue mission. I have a good driver's license. I have no criminal history, but I'm on the skids because of my alcoholism. And as of Monday, I went through Ernie Turner last week, and they released me for a week, and then I go to Rainforest in Juneau. And the ticket's paid, find your own way with your luggage, and hopefully I can get my mind straight there. But I don't qualify for a lot of stuff being as much as I say I'm a white man in Alaska. I have no prejudice. I have no racism in my heart. But some of the stuff in this state is taken away from, I ain't out begging, and I ain't out, I'm a chef by trade, but now I got COPD and some torn rotor cuffs. I'm 56, and I'm drug out and beaten from working on the slope and working in the mines and timber camps. And I hitchhiked up here in 1982, and some guy dropped me off on 5th and Gamble and said, "Hey, this is where you get out. I'm going to Hope." And after that, it was like, well, make it or, sink or swim. And I made it. A little bit. And sometimes a lot. Alaska gave me a lot of stuff. I got certified as a chef, and I went to New York, filmed a pilot about cooking in Alaska. You look me up on the internet as Alaska's deadliest chef. I had an interview on the front of the... That won't kill your wallet, put it that way. But I've had my highs and lows, and all it took was that one nip, and there went the truck, there went the car, there went, and I come from living out of a bag, and as much as I'd love to say it was an affiliation with Alcoholics Anonymous that helped me, but I got out on the fringe and spun off. If there's anything I can say to anybody that's got a drinking problem, get into AA and go through the program. And I'm going to Rainforest in Juneau on Monday, and there ain't no problem drinking or quitting drinking, but I need a little expertise up here. I don't know what to say besides what they introduced me to. Spill my guts.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for
28 days in Juneau, he's going to come back here and not have any place to live.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your experience. I think that's common. And I think, so a couple of takeaways. One is to just inform and have this community conversation about it taking many different shapes. There is no one face. There is no one typology. And I think we could even broaden that conversation at the policy level. Like, are there ways to leverage that to maybe identify possible policy and funding sources that would target specific subgroups for someone like yourself that may not qualify for other types of funding streams. So, your story is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, it's not so much the funding. It's someone that you can sit down and be that's compassionate with you. Sometimes you just need to vent, but you don't need to vent on 4th Avenue swinging and You know, and there's certain triggers that give off with anger and discontent, and you know, I've confronted. I grew up on a reservation in Montana, and I have a lot of Native friends up here. But there's times they just say, you know, they want to take a punch at you, and sometimes, and I can't say that against Caucasians or however, but you know, there's some people that are just pissed at the world.
We're ready to hear from some other groups. Do you want to talk?
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Would anybody else's group in the Anchorage room like to share with us what you brainstormed?
Will our
Yes,
lady talk?
that would be great.
Our lady. Our lady.
So we had a really great discussion. We talked about how this having a public forum like this is wonderful. It's a really nice environment to kind of get everyone's story. And more outreach is definitely needed. So kind of like, what do you need? What do you need from us? And a lot of public advocacy, and you guys can touch base on that.
Yeah, like for people, like I know a lot of guys that are getting VA money, you know, because they earned it, but then they're responsible for that money. You know, so they get it every month for the rest of their natural life, which they should. But then, you know, like some people, they either got a drug, alcohol problem, and they, you know, they have good. I'm going to pay the rent. But man, they run into somebody or their buddy or whatever, and I'm just going to have one drink. Well, you know how that turns out. And public advocacy, even though you got to be court ordered, you know, I was PO that time when they put me on it. But right now, I'm so glad, you know. And it helps. And more information, like on TV, to not demand the public to help us, the homeless men and women. Don't demand, just ask in a sympathetic, good way where they'll say, you know, okay. Because many women out there, they work so hard, they go to school, they do everything right, like the law tells them to do with God and everything. But then, you know, they have their responsibilities too. They're not out there drinking or smoking or whatever, or fighting. They're taking care of their families. So what little money they're giving the homeless, they're taking out of their family, and I can understand it. I mean, the family comes first. But if you put it in a tactful way, maybe the community will listen and say, you know, okay.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for payees, I was kind of mad at that at the beginning. But then I was at Homeward Bound, and there was this lady, she doesn't work there anymore, she moved downstates, but she helped me get on SSI, and she was my payee till she moved. And then I went down to the social service office with her, and they asked me, would you like to take care of your own money? And I looked at that gal and I was like, are you serious? No. Because I'll be back in shelter, or else I'll get robbed or something. No, I'm not going to take care of my own money. And she just looked at me and she goes, are you sure? I said, yeah. I went to 3 payees. I got robbed by 3 of them. Okay? Now I'm with a really nice payee, really good person. I don't like her, but she paid my rent. She keeps food on my table. She keeps my phone bill paid. But if I didn't have that person at Homeward Bound at the time, you know, I think I would have been right next to my brother, buried right now. But the payee situation, it works. Like he says, it works. As long as I'm getting fed, as long as I got my phone, as long as I got a roof over my head, and listen to the staff over there, yeah, that's just one of the perks. They listen to me more than I listen to them. That's besides the point. If it wasn't for them, look at Ozzy, where would we be right now? We'd be standing in line at Brother Francis' shelter, waiting for the elders to go with handicaps doing. But that's all I gotta say, but the payee is one of the most important things that people with problems with alcohol or drugs, whatever, the payee is the best in my book.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I have a question on
Yeah.
that. Is that a requirement?
With
Housing?
with some court people, it is required, like Richard was saying. You have to go to court, you have to get a public advocate, you have to have a payee. But I didn't have to.
So it's not a requirement of housing?
No, it wouldn't.
Maybe it should be. That would help a lot of problems, because you're saying that it helped you, right?
Yeah.
It's
And I
taking the
agree
money
with
out of
that.
your hand because you don't know how to manage it.
Yeah.
Although I think that someone can teach you.
Yeah, but, you
But-
know, if you're stuck in your own ways at a certain age, it doesn't matter if you go to school or you get counseling, whatever, you're gonna do what you're gonna do anyway, regardless of, you know what I mean? So if you take that responsibility, even though I think everybody should have responsibility, but sometimes some responsibilities shouldn't be in a man or woman's hands. Because like me, I ain't gonna lie, if I got $60 in my hand, I'm supposed to give you 50, it ain't gonna happen. But now, if you got it, like the state of Alaska, they can't mess with your money because of court order. And they can get in serious trouble. Now, private payee, now that's different. They can pencil with you. You see, that's why people, men and women, should be leery of, oh, I'm your best friend. I'm your girlfriend. You know what I mean? I'm your cousin. Those are the ones you gotta worry about. Because they'll keep you drunk. Well, you know what I mean? Well, they're skimming on you.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that always happens, but it does happen.
It's a good question.
I'm glad that I don't have to worry about that happening. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't want to call anybody out, but Colleen, do you have any specific feedback on that, or have we covered that ground?
On the payee situation?
Yeah.
We do have several folks at Carlick Manor that do have payees sometimes long before they came on board. A lot of them, if they're on disability, and they have a history of evictions, and it's connected to not paying rent and spending a lot of money on alcohol. They've already been connected, but we do often work with them and encouraging them. A lot of times we've had some folks who actually volunteer, and sometimes, yes, we have written letters to Social Security, and we've gotten guardians because at some point they're going to end up back in the streets, and we will definitely advocate for that. But we also have some folks who pay their rent regularly without a guardian or conservator or payee, and they do fine. But a lot of our folks have had multiple evictions or been in the streets for many years and have limited incomes, so they're not necessarily able to manage their money. Even with, like at Homer Down, we had money management, budgeting classes. And unfortunately, those skills don't necessarily transfer when you're out drinking with your friends, and you get robbed, because that happens too, and you're vulnerable. It is very effective.
Quick question, you or anybody here who's maybe connected to Office of Public Advocacy, do you know the average caseload for people who are providing payee services? Is that something anybody in the room knows?
Oh, I don't have, like, my case manager, Valerie White. She goes, Richard, you're not the only one. I think it's probably, there ain't too many people in Office of Public Advocacy, but see, they got a big old caseload. Sometimes they have clients like clear across the state. So it depends on, you know what I mean? So they have a lot of people, so they say, Richard, you're not the only client I have. I got clients that are in wheelchairs, you gotta blow a button to move. So you know what I mean? Your little problem, maybe you might think it's big, but there's somebody with a 20 times bigger problem than you, so you just gonna have to wait until I get to you. Getting a hold of your public assistant, it's like getting a hold of the president.
I went before a psychiatrist and had to go back to school to figure out what's wrong with me. I have one more question though. How many people in this consortium that we've got are homeless? Raise your hand.
I consider myself homeless.
Well, how about
There's
you?
four of us in this whole consortium. It's like calling a shill on a poker table. You
Here's
want to
something else
answer
I
all
wanted
your
to add too
questions.
was, what was the other one?
Hopefully,
Oh, yeah,
between all these people, something might get accomplished here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're hoping. So again, I don't want to sort of squelch people's comments or questions, but I do want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from all the groups. So does anybody want to go next? Sherry, thanks.
So we talked a little bit about just the stigma around mental illness, and I'll use a different version. But so if you break your arm, have you heard? You break your arm and everybody's like running over to sign your cast. But if you have a depression or substance addictions, everybody's gone. And so I mean, there's just a huge stigma around mental illness in general. So we kind of talked about that as a barrier, and then the sort of reaction of some individuals against the housing first model, and that you have to be sober before you can get into housing, which is kind of a backwards way of doing it because there's so many barriers there. We also talked a little bit about different populations, like needing programs for transition age youth and even homeless college students, and how do you get those youth out of those situations, or a felon who has a felony on their record and finding housing for them. And then we talked a little bit too about innovative solutions like tiny houses and church groups being a major part of solutions.
They're part of the community. And it's their problem as well.
Thank you for that.
All over.
Yeah, that's all great suggestions.
This lady that was talking about the public advocacy, the payees. Okay, I went through, like I told the guys before, I went through 3 of them. This last one I went through, I asked her, how many guys you got on your caseload? And she told me the specific number, and then she goes, I'm not taking any more, but I was referred to her. And she sat there and she goes, you're the last one I'm taking. I cannot have an overload, because look what happened to you before. If I have an overload, they robbed you, they took your money. I'm not gonna do that. So that's what she was asking about. Ask, when you get a payee, ask how many clients you have. How many clients you have? Could you take me on?
Good. Thank you for that, Russell. Who wants to go next?
I think we have about 2 or 3 more groups, right?
Yeah, you want to take ours?
Okay, so I'll just say something. So we started talking about sort of how homeless services tend to be concentrated in particular parts of cities, and that's true for Anchorage. And what a potential remedy might be, like scattered site housing or something like that. But then that created another barrier, and that is public transportation. How do people who are in these far-flung sites get to the services that they may need? And we generally talked about segregation, income-based segregation and housing in our city, and potential solutions. So we kind of went beyond just homelessness to talk about poverty in general. Then we talked about lack of services for transitional housing, detox, substance abuse, and so on. And then sort of our last issue was, if you have a limited pot of money and you're a policymaker and you're in Juneau, and you have to make a decision between, putting the money into something like Housing First, which is a economically prudent decision, or an alternative, maybe putting it into services that help homeless mothers and young children. It is a moral decision. And how do you as a politician say, we're going to put the money into helping these folks who, a lot of folks, some poor are deserving of help and some are not. I mean, it's kind of a reality that we have to deal with.
Thanks. Anybody else? Yes, please. Thanks.
People that are more deserving of help are people that have been victims of crime, domestic violence. Their lives are devastated, and then they're left on their own.
Yeah.
They get no help. Just deal with it. And that's all I'm going to say, because I lived through it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That is a challenge we're going to need to work on. That came through loud and clear in our group here, so thank you for that.
And I think, do we have 1 or 2 more things I haven't shared yet? Yeah, sure.
I think as a group, we focused on celebrating the humanity of our homeless citizens. I think a lot of people are out of touch with the fact that we're all basically the same. We are all people that are deserving of the same equal rights, but we forget because some of us are bundled up sleeping on streets, and some of us are driving around in nice cars. You start to see those things as things that make you different. They don't. We were talking about different ways to reach out, leafleting, events, just put names to the faces and just bring back the humanity. We were playing around with the idea of like, we have all these things that we see on buses about things that don't matter. I don't want to see that. I don't care. Who are these people? But why not promote, this person who lived on the streets for a while, for a long time? We don't know. Let's talk about it. Learn more here. Here are your resources. I used to be homeless. Let's talk about how that stopped and how you can also follow what I did to get on my feet, or what my mother did to get on her feet, and the resources that were made available to her. Bring in, this is my sister, this is my uncle, this is my friend, these are my family members, these are your family members, this is your community, and a little bit less of the, you're homeless, I'm not.
Great ideas. Thank you for that. Do we have anybody else?
Right. Yeah, within our group, or did you want to?
We kind of talked about like kind of removing the stigma, the stereotypes around homelessness, how getting the idea out that it's not their fault, they're not choosing to do it for the most part. We talked a little bit about how getting the public in on it as well as just like taking like the moral decision out of it, and just like logically it makes us a lot financially. It costs less money to have them in houses than out on the streets. How you can really affect like tourism and all the other, we can start spending less money on people being homeless by helping them out. And we discussed a little bit about spreading the word to the homeless people and getting the community out. We mentioned like in Fairview, if we could give the community members like leaflets for the resources, and then maybe they can hand that out to people that they see on the streets. And so it's not just like it's not a you versus me. It's you're homeless and I'm not. It's like it's our community and we're in this together kind of a thing.
Thanks.
We were kind of along the same lines of the humanity group over there. We recognized that that one of the big problems with the homeless is is where's the funding? At Carlick Manor, we're always looking for funding and stuff like that. But I've participated in the pay, click, give thing myself, and quite honestly, that's how it goes. I mean, you don't see any results. You don't hear anything. All you get is like a thank you icon. If there was some sort of way to get that, make it more appealing to the anybody who. But anyway, that's just a small idea. But trying to bring back the humanity to the people, put a face to. You see the kitties and the critters on the commercials, save the poor kittens, save the people over there in another country. Well, all they show is the worst of the worst here in America. And I think people believe that that's throwing money down the hole, which unfortunately that's how I kind of felt when I pick, click, give. It's like, well, that's just, it doesn't go anywhere. We also talked about, working with the elderly and the able versus the disabled. There's a lot of the people, the homeless, a lot of them do want to work. They lost jobs. They lose that piece of identity of being able to, I provide a living. I work for this. I do something. If there were some more programs that did menial tasks that nobody even street sweepers, just some sort of a work program, that it would actually be recognized as they're doing good for the community, whereas some of the stigmatisms that Carlick Manor has is all they do is drink. That's not all they do. It's if we can take away and give back, make them feel more empowered contribute to the community more. I think the community would be a little more welcoming of it, and it'd be nice to be endorsed by a major company, wouldn't it? But
we are.
Yeah.
Can I give some insight? One more time, can I give some insight? The 15th of this month, I was supposed to go to Point Lay, 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off. I'm a chef by trade. No one in the camp. It's a 28-man camp. Cook to the village. Walk with $10,000. Come back to Anchorage with $10,000. Homeless. Still, and you know, I could get anything at any time, but you know where I would end up being an alcoholic. I denied that job. I went through Ernie Turner's, and Ernie Turner's turned me onto a program that I'm more than willing to go to find out exactly the base of my alcoholism. I've had numerous job opportunities, and I could be a productive member of society, but not when I'm drinking. So I need to, thank you. I need to find a way to straighten myself out. You know, I don't want to be on 4th Avenue no more. I don't want to work 6 weeks on, come back to town with a ton of money and get everybody else all blown out. Oh shit, I might live 2 weeks with 10 grand downtown. Ringing the bells, taking a cab to this Bush company. I don't need that no more. I'm 56 years old, I've broken down, and I just want to go to programs that can help me and be able to understand it, not go because I'm made to go. I ain't court-ordered to go anywhere. You know, it's something that someone needs to do and realize that the only way to, I don't know where to put a finger on it. Like I said, the psychiatrist had to go back to school to figure me out. You know, it ain't funny, but I'm not violent, I'm not, I just, when I drink,
I think that's kind of been identified in several circles, just the fact that there are a lack of treatment options for folks that need it. And if you come to a place in life where you need treatment or desire treatment or are ready for treatment, that's now. That's not a week from now. That may not even be a couple hours from now.
I leave Monday at 9 a.m.
Right.
My bags are packed.
Thank you for that. That's a really good insight. Same here. I really like the idea of pick, click, give, and having some kind of a mechanism for feeding back. Here's what your dollars did. You know, thank you for your contribution. This is what it's done for our community. So I think that's a really tangible outcome we could work towards. I did want to have we heard from everybody in the room here? I wanted to have an opportunity to hear from some of the
Wait, there's
rural.
still doing no. Oh, sorry. I was just saying. No, wait. I'll contribute.
Yeah, you're up, Sue. We didn't forget you.
Yeah. Well, we didn't. Everybody else has had to leave, but you know, I think we had a fairly frustrated discussion. We're all too aware of the barriers. You know, which is the fact that we have a tremendous shortage of facilities, and that there's no financial incentive to build more, that we just have such a great housing shortage. But, you know, I will say, you know, for us in Nome, or again, our homelessness and a lot of our problems are driven by alcohol, and we don't have an alcohol treatment program here, and it's like, boy, I wish we could get to the heart of this problem. Otherwise, we're still sort of putting Band-Aids on it. But at least we don't have homelessness is in or alcohol is in everybody's face in Nome, because it's very public. When there was a very intensive community survey where people could just simply identify what did they feel were the greatest issues in Nome, and you know, there were maybe 50, 60 different things listed. The number one problem identified was public intoxication, and our shelter helps with that. But we just have a tremendous shortage of services. We have a shortage of caseworkers, and we also have a lack of professional capacity. We have a number of positions that go unfilled in this town. We can't get people to move to Nome because they've heard there's no housing, and what housing there is prohibitively expensive. The director of the regional nonprofit, their wellness program, the director position was advertised. Not one single person applied. So what we often have in Nome is, the saying is, anybody with a high school diploma can become a director of a program if you're simply sort of the warmest body that raises your hand. And I hate to put us ourselves down, but we struggle. That there's also, the problem that so many of the people we're trying to serve, once you're down, man, there's just no way up again. That, any of these barrier crimes keep you from getting, we have so many people with barrier crimes because of their history with alcohol, so they can't get jobs, so they're not entitled to low-income housing, and we just keep exacerbating the problem. So I don't have any kind of conclusions, just that, I don't know, the deeper I get, the more overwhelmed it feels as to how we're going to find our way out of this. But that's kind of what I guess our cost of living here is really tremendous. We are still paying $6 a gallon for fuel oil and $6 a gallon for gas and $3 a pound for onions. So I don't know. I have to say, I've lived here a long, long time, and the future looks bleaker than I've seen it look before. Well, that was a real positive note, wasn't it? It's not easy to sit in this room by myself.
I can really feel your frustration. I mean, one of the reasons why I first thought to invite you to this was because I remember hearing you at Juneau, and you had so nicely articulated some of the barriers to accessing things like VASH vouchers and Section 8 vouchers in your region. So I just want to acknowledge I feel that frustration from you. And while this isn't a solution, I think one thing that we can do as far as takeaways for today is to recognize that we are a big state with really diverse needs. So to make sure that we are checking in with places like Nome, that we are checking in with smaller communities to make sure that they have a voice at the table, I know isn't a solution, but it's a way to start the conversation in a truly statewide way. Let's not forget what Sue has just told us here today. It's going to be easy for us to leave the room and go about doing whatever we do programmatically in terms of being a regular citizen, going back to our jobs on Monday. But I think Sue has given us something to really continue to reflect on, is how do we make sure that this is a statewide conversation and honor what you've just shared with us. So I personally want to thank you for that. And I know that your frustration will likely continue, but it hasn't fallen on deaf ears.
Can I add?
Well, I appreciate that, and I've gotten some good feedback. Listening to how other people are dealing with things. We didn't, like I said, everything we've done in Nome along these lines. It's been trial and error and figuring it out as we go. That. I was a former wildlife biologist turned artist who all of a sudden finds myself in the world of homelessness and alcoholism because I live here. So, we're constantly learning and appreciate what everyone else is doing. I wish we had more services here. Sometimes I really do think we should just send people to Anchorage, which isn't the right answer, but sometimes you feel that way. But we get tremendous volunteerism and a lot of donations. There is still a sense of cohesion and a sense that homelessness and alcoholism, all of this is pretty personal here for us. It isn't just numbers. Thank you for letting us be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Sue.
That segues into what I've been wanting to say for a good deal of today, which is everyone here has had thoughts and ideas, and we about this issue and probably several other related issues, so we all try and look at it through our own little lens or our own little micro world. But the bottom line is that the reason that everyone's here is because we're a community. And I think that that's a really good place to start. Both, we're the community of Alaska, and everyone here is part of it. And one of the ways that I see, or the best way that I see to accomplish outreach and public perception and assistance to our other fellow community members is to say, you and I and all of us together, we're in the same community. What do we want to see this community look like? And where that comes from, like if you could imagine the ideal community that you want to live in, that's where I think that we need to start with, is like the grand vision. And that's a really tough thing to say because we all come in from our own little microcosm. But I think it's a really important perspective to take. And it's not just from where we're at or what we're seeing. It's what you need and what I need and what I can offer you and what you can offer me. That's the way that I see all of it, and it would help with all of this advocacy and outreach, because everyone likes to divide us up into us versus them, and it's not. It's us. Sorry for giving the speech.
No, good point. I think we
Someone's
are all
got to lead the charge.
Right. That's exactly it. We're all interdependent here. So I wanted to give some of the other regional folks an opportunity to participate, but I think we might have had a little regional fallout. Anybody else want to speak on the regional side?
Hi, this is Danny Peterson here in Juneau. It's a group of one here, and I'm a private citizen, just representing myself, and I'm just a concerned citizen, basically, but I'm something of a media advocate for the cause of homelessness, and I made a 2-minute promotion for this event. I interviewed a homeless man who told me about his experiences as a chronic homeless man here in Juneau. And the problem of homelessness is very visible in Juneau, and it's been something that I've cared about for a long time, because I recognize the fact that if it weren't for a certain just chance of fate, I could have become homeless myself, really. And I think that's true. I think it's true that anybody could become homeless, and so I definitely have a kind of a humanitarian view of it. And the person who I was talking to, his name was Jonathan. He was talking about how he had a severe mental illness that made it so that he wasn't able to work, and this seemed to me to be the main cause of why he was homeless. And I just think in general, issues of mental illness and addiction should be treated more like a public health matter and screened and given more resources publicly. And I think that those who are mentally ill, severely mentally ill, and who are suffering from addictions are somewhat ostracized in our society in general. And I just want to speak a little bit about what my point of view is on addiction, because it's a matter that's really close to me and important to me, as is mental illness. And something that really influenced me was this movie on PBS called The House I Live In, and it's about the war on drugs, and really a cost-benefit analysis of the war on drugs and what it's really doing in our society. And what I basically take away is that addiction, which I think is a big part of homelessness. I don't know. I mean, I'm not any kind of expert in any way, shape, or form, but it seems to me that addiction is a big component of it. And I've struggled with alcohol abuse in my own life, and so it matters to me. And I've learned through the classes that I had to take through those struggles that addiction is a medical disease. It's recognized in the medical community, it's the consensus in the medical community that it's a medical disease, and yet the structure in our society is still set up in a way that treats addiction like a moral crime. And I think that the system is just currently broken, and I think that we need to stop thinking of addiction as a moral crime and do something to treat people with addictions rather than put them in incarcerated facilities, because that often saps resources away from them, and that lack of resource, I think, is what a huge cause of homelessness is. And like in Portugal, for example, I read recently in a Huffington Post article, they decriminalized all drugs in 2001, and teen use of illicit drugs has gone down. New HIV infections have gone down from sharing needles, and more people have put themselves into rehab centers after this 2001 decriminalization. And that's all I wanted to say. So just thank you for letting me have something to say today. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being present today, and thank you for your patience and holding out. We do have a couple of other things we'd like to do, but just reminded me, do we want to like pass around some kind of a sheet where we can allow people to sign up so that we can all continue to be in touch with one another beyond this event? Yeah. I don't know. Yes.
So yeah, if you would like to hear, I mean, we're going to be public about this anyway. Afterwards, we are going to write up everything that we learned today. We have our lovely note takers over there on the side. And you are going to be hearing about this in the public again, at least that's our goal. But if you specifically would like us to share our results with you, I guess is what we're asking. If you give me any kind of a contact, so I know not everybody does email, not everybody might have a phone in here today, but if you have a phone number or an email or a physical mailing address, if it comes to that, and you want us to get in touch with you again, let's do that.
We also have a Facebook page for those of you that may or may not be into that thing. That's another way we can continue to stay in touch with one another. The idea is that this event would have life beyond the event itself, so that's why we had the recording, and we hope to broadcast it and reshare it with the community and kind of repurpose some of these findings in a way that can continue to kind of push this community dialogue. And one of the outcomes was that we wanted to use these findings to maybe develop kind of a northern network on homelessness. This was tied to the Alaska Anthropological Association meetings the other day, where we had a speaker from Canada and a speaker from Florida who does work in the Canadian Arctic to try to push it beyond just Alaska and start to think of what maybe construing like a northern network on homelessness. So these are all ideas that we have for the future, and anybody that's interested in being part of that effort, please sign up. Don't feel you have to, but we would certainly enjoy continued interaction with you all. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I think we're going to move on. We're going to move on to our last activity here, and this information is crucial for us, actually. We, as a part of developing a network, so first off, there's already a lot of agencies that exist and services that exist, so we're not wanting to duplicate and we're not wanting to step on anybody's toes, but we think that there could be better collaboration between what does exist. And that's what he's talking about with the Northern Network on Homelessness. And we actually have some people in Canada who we want to reach out to. And we'll be sharing that information in the future. There's some very similar things going on in the Canadian Arctic, where they have small hamlets and small villages and hub towns. And some of them are fly-in only. Housing is expensive, food is expensive, there's not enough jobs. And so we're seeing the same things in Northern Canada. So making more of a connection and more of a public connection is really the goal. So with that in mind, we're going to move into our last activity. I have several people who signed a media release. This is for us because it is going to make the news. There was reporters in here earlier, if you remember. And we would also like to use the information that we get here from today. So if you haven't signed this yet, I'm going to leave it at the front. And just please sign it on your way out. For our last activity, this information is very important to Travis and I and to our team here because we, of course, need funding in order to do this.
Are we still on TV in Juneau?
Yes.
Yep.
We of course need funding to move any kind of effort like this forward, to make our network, and to continue to do public outreach like this. We're going to write a big grant, and we're going to use the information you give us right now to help inform our grant. So we're actually doing just a little bit of research right now with you guys, identifying public knowledge and public, desires, what you guys have. So for that, I'm going to pass around Post-it notes, and we have a ton of pens. And there's a box in the middle of the room here. And what we would like you to do is don't put your name or anything on here. This is all anonymous. We'd like you to write down one thing that you learned today that you didn't know before today.
One priority focus area that you'd like to see additional attention on.
One priority for future actions, future solutions. What should be the priority for Alaska for northern homelessness? And then one thing that you think that organizations and agencies could do to better engage the public or better inform the public. Okay?
So one thing you learned, one priority focus area, and one thing that can be done for agencies and organizations to better engage the public. And it can be totally anonymous. We don't need names or anything. Just drop your suggestions in the box there, and then we'll cull those responses and share them with you guys through, provided that you give us an email. We'll share our
Now, is
results.
that for the students involved with this, or as far as people to raise their hand for being homeless?
This is for everybody to share your voice, and then what we hope to do is take some of those findings and then bring it back and share it with the community, share it with you all, and hopefully push some of these policy initiatives back in the Juneau and legislature folks. Okay, so it was one thing you learned. You want me to? Okay. You're gonna have to bear with my chicken scratch. Okay. Thank you.
So we're writing the questions down right now. Question number 1. One thing you learned today that you did not know before today.
If anybody has mental problems, the psychiatrist give me these that I can hand them out.
All right, so here are the questions. One thing you learned, one priority focus area, and how can agencies, orgs, and concerned citizens better engage the public on these kinds of issues moving forward? If you could read my